All right, folks, so this is part two of our chapter 8, Guided Program Development, where we will be adding the code to our Chef Shack food depreciation application. Before we get started, I'm going to go over to the VB 2017 resources folder, and I'm going to take a look at the file that we're going to be um, reading into our arrays, because before we start coding it, we have to understand what is inside that file, um, and how many arrays we're going to be creating, the type of arrays. So you want to, before you start coding these applications, take a look at the files that you're going to be using, and see actually what's in them so you understand how to create the arrays. That's kind of the most important things with these apps when you're um, reading files or writing files and stuff like that, understanding what the data looks like. So the file in your resource folder, typical folder where you have all your images, is inventory for this one. So I'm going to open up that file, and you'll see we basically have 1, 2, 3, 4 different data elements in here. So the name of the item ID or item number, the cost of the item, and the number of items we have. And then it starts over again. So name of the item again, item ID, cost of the item, and um, and number of items. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. So we're going to create an 8-element array. We'll declare it a 7. Um, so this is an important thing to understand. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means it's going to be 4 different arrays that we need to create for this. And one of them, the name array, the array with the name of the item, is going to be shared between the two forms. So we're going to need to make that a public shared array when we declare that. So it's just a couple things to keep in mind before you start coding, so you realize what you're working with, because um, in the subsequent cases that you're working on this chapter, they're not going to tell you how many arrays you need to make, but you're going to have to look in the data and figure it out. So if we look at the savings file for one of these apps, there's 2 data elements. So we have months, okay, and then we have, so this must be the amount of savings that you had each month, or maybe it's the interest that you accrued each month based on your savings. So this one would have 2 arrays. We'll look at another one, maybe the songs one. Okay, so the songs one we have looks like a song name and a band, music genre, and I think this is the length of the song. So this one would have 3 different arrays. So you'd have 2 string arrays, and then this would probably be a decimal or a double array. Okay, just kind of give you a heads up on that before you start working on the actual cases. So let's go ahead, and we'll come back to these files when we start doing the coding, um, to using the stream reader to bring these files in. This is kind of cool when you start working with external elements, and reading data from outside the application. All right, so let's go out to my flash drive where I save this. Visual Basic, Chapter 8, and I'll open my depreciation solution. Okay, so you remember this, we've got our depreciation form. This is kind of our main application. I just noticed that I have a typo here. Depreciation by method, not my method. All right, so that is good. So let's start coding. So I'm just going to right click on my form and click view code. This will bring up my code editor, and I'm going to go in and start my comments. Program name. F stack truck depreciation. There's some things that they're doing in this app that I don't like the way they're doing them, so I might do them a little different. Some of the naming conventions they're using. So if you're not following along with my videos and you're following along just with the book, you'll see some things differently. Nothing that's going to cause any problems. If you do it the book way, stick with the book way. If you do it my way, stick with my way. You don't want to go back and forth because that way will cause you problems. Developer. Eight. Spelled the name wrong. Today is April 23rd. And purpose of our program is app term determines depreciation based on 5-year life of items in inventory using straight line and double declining. All right, so we've got our comments. Please continue doing your comments. Next thing we need to do is turn option strict on. And now we're going to start declaring our variables. Make sure when you start declaring your variables, we have a bunch of class variables here. So make sure you declare them inside the class. Don't declare them up here. You'll get an error. Make sure you declare them in the class. So we're going to declare class variables. All right, so the first one, and since we're dealing with multiple forms here, we're going to declare, instead of doing a dim statement for our class variables, we're going to declare them as private or public, just to kind of make that distinction. We could do the private ones with just a dim, but since we are declaring some as public, we'll declare them as private and public, just so we make that distinction and see that distinction as we're going through here. So I'm just going to say private int life of items as integer. I'm going to set that equal to 5. So if you happen to look in the book and you look at the way they're declaring these variables, they're putting in the book, they're putting an underscore in front of the int here. And that's a kind of a standard way of doing naming conventions when you declare private variables. But in the book, they don't do it consistently. They also do it for the shared variables, which isn't correct. So I'm not going to use, I never, in my career, never really used underscores in naming conventions. It's just kind of didn't really make any sense to me when we do it. So I've never used it. So I won't do it here. If you want to do it, that's fine. Just be consistent with it. Okay, so our life of items, we have a 5-year life, so we're going to use that for populating one of the list boxes in there. Our next variable is public shared int size of array is integer equals 7. So we have 7. If you remember, we looked at our text file. We had 7 items in the text file. So we're going to use this. I think it was actually 8 items, but we declared it 7 because it starts with 0. And we're going to use this as our variable when we declare our arrays to determine the size of them. So we don't have to put 7 in every one. That way, if it changes in all the variables, if we add one more item, we can just change it in one place. We don't have to change it in each array. Just save us a little time. I'm going to do another public shared. This is our first array declaration. So I'm going to do something a little different here too. For my arrays, I'm going to put ARR in all of my naming conventions, just so I know when I'm looking at it that's an array. They didn't do this in the book, but I'm going to do it. Just like the functions and procedures, I think it's a little easier. So we know it's a string, we know it's an array, and we'll give it the name. And this is string array inventory item. So string array inventory item, and then when we declare an array, we have to give it these parentheses to tell it that it is an array. And we're going to use this int size of array. We're going to give it 7 elements, and then we have to give it a data type. So we're going to say as string. And so that's our first array, and it's public because we're going to be passing this array to the other form. So we want to declare it public so we can share it between this form and this form, the depreciation of the share inventory, display inventory form. So that's that one. And then we have the rest of our arrays are just private. And string array item ID and size of array. And this is a string 2. So remember, this is the short number that was after, and it might be easier if we go out here to our desktop. And we will bring up resources, chapter 8, and inventory. So this was our inventory item. This is our item ID. Our next array that we're declaring is going to be our initial price. That would be a decimal array, and then our quantity. So those are our 4 arrays, and we're going to read the items into those arrays. So if you want to have your text file up while you're doing your code, just so you can look at it and determine, that might be easier for you. Just make sure when you're ready to start running your code, you close this file, because you will not be able to run your program if this file is open. So I'll close it now, just to be safe. All right, so we've got our item ID, and then another private. This is going to be a des array. Initial price. Oops, I forget. An array. Size of array. Decimal. And then private. Quantity. Let's put our naming convention in there. The size of array. All right, that is it for our class variables. Next thing we want to do is we're going to write our form load event for our depreciation form. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to double click on the background here. So it creates our form load event. And the form load event, I think we've dealt with these in previous chapters, but this is the sub procedure that runs when you start up the application. So before you click any buttons, we're going to be preloading all those list boxes with data from our text file. We're going to load it into arrays, open up the file and do a bunch of stuff. So that all happens in the form load event. I don't remember specifically if we've used this event. I think we did use this event in previous applications in previous chapters, but we didn't do as much in it as we're going to be doing here. We're going to be doing quite a bit of work in here. So let's start with our comment. And we're going to say read the inventory text file and fill the list box with inventory items. And then initialize the creator object and declare variables. All right, so if you remember from the presentation, we have this thing called stream reader and stream writer that we use for dealing with external files. So it's just a built-in library we have to declare, and it gives you functions to be able to work with files in your application. So in order to use it, we have to declare it. So we're going to say dim, and we just give it a basic name. Oops, we call it object, obj. Whoops. reader as IO dot stream reader. That's all we have to do. And that allows us to um, read the files, and you're going to be referring to it as this object reader. Just this is the object, but you alias it with this object reader. Okay, so that's the first thing we do. Next thing we have to do is tell it where our file is. So we created a variable for that, dim str location file name as string equals. So in the book, they just have it on their flash drive. So this is where you have to type in the path of where the file is. So if it's on your D drive and it's in the root, and you can just say D inventory, but it's probably not going to be located in the root directory. So my file is on my desktop in my VB 2017 resources folder. So I could type all that out, but there's an easier way to do it. And I'll give you this little trick here. If I go to properties of my file, and then I have a path here. So I can copy this path, close this down, paste that in, and it's going to be chapter 8 slash, and then let's go back and just make sure we know exactly what it's called. And it's inventory.txt. Okay. And it is case sensitive. Okay. So this is important. If you don't get this path right where the file is located, then you will run into some issues when you actually go to run the program. It'll give you an error, and you're going to actually code that error, so you'll know exactly what it is if you get the error. What did I just do? All right. So declaring a couple more variables. Dim count as integer equals 0. It's going to be a variable we use for our loop. Dim and fill as integer. These are just variables we're going to use for our loops, and then dim string file error. So this is just going to be a string. This is just going to be an error message we display if there's any problems with opening that file. The error message is the file is unavailable. Check file location. Okay. So that's it for our variables. Now we're going to start coding. First thing we want to do is verify that the file exists. I want to check to make sure the file's there. So we're going to say if io dot file dot exists. I'm going to use our variable str location and file name. Then object reader equals o dot file dot open text, open a text file, and then that location and file name variable, because we put our location and file name in here, so we should be able to just open it from that path. And I'll run it before we go too far in this, just to make sure we get our file path right. All right. And then we are going to read file line by line until end of file. So now we're going to do a loop, do while. We're going to use a peek function, object reader dot peek. So we're just looking at the file to see if there's a line there. So file object reader dot peek is not equal to -1. So that means there is a file in there. And now what we're going to do is just go through and read each one of the lines into our arrays. So we're going to start with our first one, which is str our inventory item. And we're going to use our int count variable that we initialized up here as 0, because we want to start with the first item, which is 0. Count. We're going to set that equal to object reader line. That's it. We're going to do the same thing for the 4 variables that we declared. All right. So our next one is a array, and it's item ID. Count. I'm just going to copy this. Oh, that was weird. I'm going to save because I don't want to lose my work, and the computer just did something a little weird there. And now we have, and so we got our inventory item, which is the name of the item ID, which is that short item ID, and then we have, if you remember, our price. So this array initial price. Count equal to, and paste that, and then in quantity. quantity. I got an error going on here. Figure out what's going on in a second. Yeah, we're gonna do some converts in here. That's why. Yeah, I missed that. So because we have option strict on, we can't just read these in object reader, just like everything else works with strings. So we're gonna do our little conversions here for our decimal and our integer. It works fine on the strings, but it doesn't work on these guys. So we're gonna say convert dot the decimal. We convert this one to decimal. Should solve the problem on this one. I'm going to convert this one to int32. So convert to, let's see, parenthesis at the end, and we're good. Okay, so we're in a do while loop, so we have to bump up our count value here. So after we go through the first one, we're going to go to the next one. So we're going to say int count plus equals 1. Add 1 in, so the next time through, go to the next one. All right, so we're done our loop. Now we're done when we're done our loop, we want to close our object reader. We want to close out the file. So this is a pretty important part, and some of you might forget this. If you do, you're going to have problems with your program because it's going to leave the file open after you stop running the program, and then when you go to run it again, you're going to get an error that the file's in use. So we have to object reader dot close. Simple as that. So you're just closing that object reader, closing that file out. And when you're doing stream writers, when you're writing files, the object reader dot close is what actually saves the file. So that's saves it and closes it. So that's pretty important as well. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add up that list box, or load up that list box with the items from our, we're going to put our item IDs in there, in the list box. And we're going to use a loop for that. So say fill the list box for IDs. And I'm going to just put comment in here as well. Close the file. For this one, you can use a for loop. So we're going to say for, and this is our other variable. We're going to say int fill. equals 0 to and we're going to say str array item ID dot length -1. Remember, we have one more item in there. Okay. And then inside our loop, we only have one line of code, LST. Inventory ID dot items add, and then we're going to use our array str array item ID, and then in parentheses we have to use our index for the array, so that is just going to be infill. And make sure when you're doing two things, you don't use the same control variable for the two different loops. You want to use two different control variables here, because you'll get messed up if you don't do that. Okay, so after that, we've got down here an else. We've got an else for this if. So if the file doesn't exist, we want to display our message. And we're just going to say message box. File error, which is right here, comma, and we just want to display error in that message box. And we've got an error. Can't do anything else, so we just want to close the application. All right, so that should have everything we need to load up our arrays and populate the list box. So if we did everything right here, when I open the file, we did everything right because I've got my item IDs in this list box. So remember, I didn't type anything in this list box. It read them from the array. So if we open up that file again, go to inventory, first one is A101 and then D209, A101, D208. Let's look at that again. A101, D208, D209, yeah. So that's the second array. So it's reading each item from that second array because we loaded each record here into each array. So it's grabbing that second one and reading it in. So we're good for our first part of this. All right. So the next thing we want to do is code the calculate depreciation button. So let's stop this. I'm going to save this again, go back to our form, wrong form, close this one. And we'll double click on this. And we're just going to put a comment in here. Calculate depreciation. Right? So we've got some variables here. So our first one is dim selected item ID. as integer. And then we have selection string. So this is just if the user didn't select in item ID, we're going to display this message. And we're just going to say missing selection. All right, and then dim should be a string here. Is that? Got to have those naming conventions. String select depreciation error. String. Oh, our select depreciation errors. Select a depreciation message. Select a depreciation method. Okay. And then we have another selected inventory item message. Inventory item ID error. This book is using pretty long variable names. If I was doing this on my own, I probably wouldn't spell out inventory or spell out depreciation. I might say INV or DEP just to make things easier. I'm going with what the book says, but it would save me a little time if I did that. Okay. So select and inventory item ID. So those are all our variables for our messages. And so now we're going to do our calls to our procedures. We're going to have two procedures here that we're calling to calculate the depreciation, straight line depreciation, and the double declining depreciation. So not a whole lot of code here. So let's put a comment in so we can say what we're doing. So say if this box and depreciation method are selected, all the depreciation procedures. All right. So I'm going to say if LST inventory ID Selected index. So this is if they've selected an item, so we're actually getting the index value of the item in the list box, which will correspond to the index value of the array. So you're selecting the item directly from the array. So if the selected index is greater than 0, that means we actually have something selected. Then we're going to say int selected item ID equals list inventory ID dot selected index. So we're just going to grab the index value of whatever item in the list box they've selected. Okay, so if they've selected the first one, the selected index is going to be 0, and we know which array value to go for the rest of the items. So, and then now we're going to check the radio button. So it's if rad straight line checked, and we're going to actually be calling a procedure here that we haven't created yet. So we're going to get an error, but that's okay. We're going to go back and create those procedures later. So I'm going to call this PRC straight line depreciation. And we're going to pass an argument to it. And that's going to be our int selected item ID. So again, we're going to have an error here, and that's okay because we haven't created it yet. Else if. So if they haven't selected rad straight line, they've selected rad double declining. Say PRC double declining depreciation. And again, we're going to pass that int selected item ID that we populated up here with our list item. Okay, and again, it's okay that we have errors in here because we haven't created those procedures yet. We're going to do that later on. So if none of these are selected, then we want to display a message box telling the user we're going to use these errors up here. Message box. My shift key's not working. There we go. So message box string. Select depreciation error, and we're going to do our 2 commas, and then missing selection. So those are our 2 errors, and then make our end if. And then after this end if, we've got another else. This one, and this is another message box. This is if they didn't actually select an item ID. What is going on here? We got a little, yeah, forgot to say as string over here. There we go. All right. So this should be good. So when we hit the button calculate click, we're populating all our messages. I just want to put in a couple comments here. Selecting this is our error for not selecting depreciation method, and this is our error for selecting item ID. Right. So this should be good. We're okay with not having messages, procedures here because we're going to go create these right now. All right. With that, so let's create our two sub procedures for straight line depreciation and double declining depreciation. Now look in the book here. It's got two procedures for straight line depreciation and double declining depreciation. I think you could do these as one procedure to make things easier for you. They're very, very similar. And when I see things that are very, very similar, I always think you could do it as one procedure. I'm going to stick with what it's doing in the book just to make things easier to make this video go faster. But I will probably, when I do the second one, copy the first one, and we'll just make some changes to it as we go along just to save time. All right. So we're going to say private sub PRC straight line depreciation. We're going to say Bivel. ID, integer. Up there. So we named it right. You notice the error goes away there. We're not doing anything in this yet, but creating it, just creating that sub procedure up here where we call it, it knows that there's something that exists, so that that message disappears. So let's put our comment in so we can say what we're doing in here. Compute and display the depreciation of the selected item. So the first thing we're going to do is declare our variables. What's kind of nice about this application is we don't have any text boxes that we're entering data in, so we don't have to do a whole lot of validation in this one. We still have, the not selecting validation we have to do, but not a whole lot of, checking if things are numeric because there's no data input. So that makes this one a little bit easier in that sense, which is kind of nice. All right, so we're going to declare about 5 variables here, maybe 6. Yeah. Dim. First one is int. Right. Present year. As integer. Dim. Yes. Right. Present value. Set that equal to 0. And dim. Depreciation. That's straight total. So these are, if you remember, all of the list boxes we created down the bottom. This is where we're going to be grabbing the initial values for those and populating them. And now we have a couple of placeholders for our text boxes. We're going to populate. String depreciation item. String. Depreciation. So if you remember back in this form, we put some placeholders in here. So this line of code, we're just going to do that. This code, this is where we're going to put that initial value, and we'll probably concatenate the actual depreciation later on. Okay, so then we get one more variable. String quantity message. String equal. And this is just a placeholder for quantity as well. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is call another procedure that we haven't created yet. So put a comment in. Call the proceed to fix. Remember, we made all those list boxes in the bottom invisible. So now we need to make them visible before we put any data in them. And again, we haven't created this yet, so we're going to get an error here, and that's fine. We're going to go and create that later. Another comment. Now we're going to display the item and quantity of the selected item. This is a lot of typing, but our other procedure is going to be just like this. So I'm going to try to do as much copying and pasting as I can in the next one. Some things are going to be a little bit different, but most of it should be the same. Like I said, I think in the guided program development, they could have made this as one procedure, not two. But we won't get into that right now. We'll stick with the code. All right, so LBL item text, set that equal to string. Depreciation item, and we're going to concatenate str array inventory item and then int item ID, which is right here that we passed in. Paste that. Okay, and then the quantity, LBL quantity.text string quantity message and array quantity, and same thing here. Item ID. But we have to convert this one because it's an integer. So to string, that should do it. Now we actually calculate the depreciation. Calculate straight line. So our straight line depreciation is equal to S initial price. Actually, it's this the initial price. I think we can still use our item ID that we copied there, divided by life of items. And int life of items should be a class variable that we declared up here. So that's why we can refer to it here without getting an error, because it's a class variable. All right, so now we want to declare our desk straight present value. That is initial price and our item ID. Okay, so we've got that. So now we need to, so we've set our initial values for those. So now we've got to populate all our list boxes. So we're going to have to use a loop for that. So loop for life of items. For int present year equals 1, 2. Of items. So we're going 1 to 5 because we're going to do it for 5 years. So now we want to accumulate the total, accumulate the total depreciation. So I'm going to say this total plus equals depreciation. So we're going to add our straight depreciation each time through the loop to our straight total. And then we're going to display our amounts in our list boxes. So we have list year. Year.items, add. Straight present year. String. Remember, when you're displaying anything in a text box or a list box, you got to do that to string. So if you get any errors on these, it's probably because you're not converting it to string. We have to do that on all of these. And so we're going to format as currency. T present value. If you're not sure what you're doing here, this one is a little more complicated than some of the other applications that you're working on. But so what we're doing here is populating these list boxes. Present value, items, add. Straight present value for this one. Dot to string. What happens if I just click off this? I have to put the. Sometimes it'll put the two parentheses in there for you, but this time it's not doing it. So present value to string, that's a dollar amount. So we're going to put our C in our to string there. And then this year depreciation. Dot items. Add. I'm putting this straight depreciation in here. And I think we're going to format this one with currency as well. And then total depreciation. Dot add. This is def straight total. String. And I'm going to format that one with the currency as well. And then we're just going to increment our straight present value. For the next time through, because we're adding our depreciation to that. We're actually subtracting our depreciation from that. Depreciation is. So remember, we're doing, usually when we increment, we do a plus equals. This one we're doing a minus equals. All right. So that is it for this procedure. But our other one is very, very similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this whole thing, private sub, paste it down here, and save myself a whole lot of typing. So it gives me a bunch of errors here because I have two of them. So we're going to name this one, not straight, but double declining. This will save us a lot of typing here. So we'll just change our comment to straight line. It's double declining. You're doing things a little different here. So this is in double present year. Probably do a copy and paste. Double and just double total. All right. So it looks like they are not using these two here. Doing it a different way. So we'll stick with that way. So we are going to call the make objects visible. And then our label, depreciation. So in this one, they're hard coding the value in there. It's kind of silly. Doing it a different way. So let's stick with that. Kind of silly that they have two procedures and they're doing them different ways, but I'll go with it. Change this to the depreciation of the item. And then on this one, we're going to change this one to quantity. But sometimes books aren't always correct. Sometimes when they do things in a book, they're not necessarily doing things the best way. So all the rest of this stuff should be the same, except our double declining here. So we don't need this, it looks like. And we'll change a straight line to double declining. And then this is going to be this double present year value. Let's double present year value. No, I missed that one. That's double. Present. Double present year value. That's a problem when you copy code. Sometimes you miss stuff. That's double present year value. Here we're going to set that to that's initial price, item ID, good. And then we're going to do our loop for int double present year. One to int life of items, that's good. So here they're doing the calculation in here instead of up above. So they're just doing things a little differently in this one. That's okay. There might be a reason for it. I see why they're doing it. The formula for double declining depreciation inside the loop to repeat the process. Maybe we couldn't have done this with one procedure. I'm sure we could have. Just would have been a little more complicated. All right. So we're going to complete our double depreciation here. Yes, double depreciation. So this is actually our formula. And the other one that we did above, right up here. So this double depreciation. Just making sure I'm getting this right. Equals yes, full present year value times 2. We'll put the D because we're multiplying it by a decimal. And then we're going to divide by life of items. So that's our 5. This is just going to calculate that depreciation a little faster for a different type of item. Okay. And now we accumulate the double depreciation. So we're just going to change this to double. Clean this up. So it'll be double total. So I think I could have done a search and replace here. Made things a little faster for me. And so I'm just going to go through this. We got year, present value, year total, double. Yeah. So this will just take a few minutes. So all you'll have to do with these is just change all the straights to double. And this is double present year value. Double. Double. This is our year. And this is double again. So I would run this right now just to make sure it works, but all our objects were visible, so we won't really be able to see if it's working until we write that procedure, which we're going to do right now. Okay, so we've got our two procedures for our depreciation, our double declining, and our straight. So now we're going to write our make objects visible procedure. So private sub PRC make so now we go up here and make objects visible. We shouldn't be getting errors in these anymore, so that's good. All right. So display the objects and result. A little bit of typing here. All right. LBL item dot quantity year. We have list year. Label present value. as you're going through these, it might be easier for you on procedures like this to go to the book and just read it off, or you can, just wait till I'm done typing, pause it, and just type it that way rather than listening to me go through this and watch my slow typing, because I know I'm not the fastest typer in the world. And then list present value. Visible. It's true. And then label year depreciation. Visible equals true. And then list year depreciation dot label total depreciation. List depreciation. I think that is it. We got to clear out any previous data though. So list year. It might be a little faster. Oops. No, that's not faster. I just deleted it. Copy and paste it for the rest of them. List year dot items dot clear. Try that again. See. Got 4 of them. So this is list value. Yeah, it's a little faster. Depreciation. That's year depreciation. And then list total depreciation. All right. So that is it for our make objects visible. So let's run this just to see what happens before we go any further. So we select an item number, straight line, and compute. And it's giving me a message. Select an inventory item ID. I did. There we go. Calculate depreciation. Oh, okay. So now we can this. So this looks like it's working. So we select an item number, calculate depreciation. So we've got our present year, the present value. You can see the value decreases over 5 years and what the depreciation is each year, and then the total depreciation adds up. Straight line. Select another item in here. Gar. And it shows us what the item is. It's a stove, office computer. good. So this looks like it's working. All right. So now what we have to do is code our menus. So we're going to do our display inventory menu first. So this is going to display our second form. Put a comment in here. Create an instance of the form display inventory. So I'm going to dim, call this rm second new. So what we're basically doing here is creating an instance of the form display inventory. We're going to hide current form. Put a comment in here. Hide the current form and display inventory. Okay, and then form second dot show dialog. That's all we have to do for that one. All right, and then I got a couple more here. Clear. Oops. A little bit of coding in this one. I'm looking to see if I can copy anything here, but it doesn't look like I can. So we're just going to have to suffer through the typing in here. Clear the form. All right. So we select our selected index to number -1, so nothing's selected of our item ID there. And then add straight line. Checked. False. Red. Declining. Checked equals false. visible, false. Quantity visible equals false. Here. Here. Label present value. False, basically just making everything invisible here. List present value. And I forgot something here. Just here. Clear out the items too. So let's make things a little faster for us and just copy these 3 lines because we'll be doing the same thing for year depreciation and total depreciation. So this is year depreciation. And this is we'll do the same thing for total depreciation. That saves us a little bit of time. That's it for this one. And then we've got our exit button that we need to code. So this one, usually we would just close the form, but since we have multiple forms, we can't do that. We have to application.exit. So a little bit different when you're working with multi-form applications here. All right. So now we're going to be coding our second form here. So let's do a save all. I'm going to close these down and we're going to open up this guy. View code. All right. I'm going to turn our option strict on. Oh, no, don't want to do that there. I'm tired. All right. All we're basically doing here is display the inventory items in sorted order. All right. So now we can turn option strict on. We'll go back here and we're going to double click on the background of our form and we're going to be putting all our code in our form load event. So let's put a comment in. Just gonna Slack is on. Call the array previous form. Dim string item as string. First thing we want to do is sort the string inventory item array. So we're going to say array, and sorting arrays are really simple. Array dot sort, and then we refer to the array on the other form. Let's say form depreciation dot, and if we did things correctly, we should be able to type in str array inventory item. And you'll notice that that is the only array that's displayed because we declared that as public shared. So that takes that array and sorts it for us. Populate it. So we've got to write a little for loop to do that. We're going to comment in, display contents of array in this box. This is what we're going to use our for each loop. For each string item that we just declared up there in form depreciation dot For each inventory item, we are going to say LST display dot items dot add not item height. And then we're just going to add string item. And that's it for that one. So we're just pulling that array from the other form and displaying it in this list box. And then the last thing we need to do is code this return, open the depreciation form. This is our return to the previous form. So we declare first new instance of that form. Hide this form. First dot show dialog. All right. So I think that is it. So let's run this again. Good. So there is something going wacky with this. When I select the first item here, it's giving me an error. And I'm going to look into that later and update you in class on what's going on with that, because it's almost midnight and I'm tired. But let's test out that other form, display inventory. And you'll notice that this is in sorted order, which is a different order than here. So point of sale register is 4. So it took these names here that were in an array and it just sorted them in alphabetical order. So it starts with O, but that's the first one they have. So that's what we were looking for. Turn to application, it brings us back here. We can select this. Oops, so that works. I didn't select the depreciation method. And for some reason, this one isn't working, but I'm going to look into that. I'm a little tired and I don't feel like doing it right now, but I'll look into it and I'll update this app. And it's obviously something I missed here for that. So I just won't. I'm not going to debug it now because I'm tired, but I'll fix it and let you guys know in class. All right, so that's it for the guided program walkthrough for Chapter 8. Good luck, have fun with it, enjoy. Hey folks, so this is just a little addendum to the guided program development for Chapter 8. I wanted to go through and take a look and debug what the issue was that I was seeing when we were testing the depreciation app. It seemed like when we were running the form and selecting, let me run it so we can see what the error was. Seems like it runs fine when we select any of these items except the first one. So when I click calculate depreciation, it seems to run fine. But then when I click on the first one and hit calculate depreciation, it's telling me to select an inventory item. I have a pretty good idea what it might be. I think it's going to be a pretty easy fix. but I'm not sure. So there's something with the index of this list that it's not working for. Again, I think I have an idea of what it is. So let's stop it and click on the button. So it's in this button. And yep, I could debug it, and so we could step through and see what's going on. But I think what I missed here when I was coding it is it's saying if list inventory ID selected index is greater than 0. So, which makes sense with the error we're seeing. We want this to be greater than equal to 0. So it wasn't working on 0. It's greater than equal to 0. It wasn't working on 0 because we were saying greater than 0. 0 is the first item in that index. So now if I run this, we should be able to select this first item, click straight line, and it does the calculation. So that's what we're expecting. And I'll just do one for the third one just to make sure the rest of them work as well. Yeah, so that's good. That was a really, really easy fix. So I'm going to append this video to the end of the previous one, so you'll see it all as one video. All right, see you later.